pani sa re ma pani sa ga re pa ma ma ga re sa ga sa ma pani sa re ma pani sa ga re pa ma ma ga re sa ga ma ga re ni pa ma pani ga re ma ga re sa ni sa ma pani sa re ma pani sa ga re pa ma ma ga re sa ga ma ga re ni pa ma pani ga re ma ga re sa ni sa ga re ma ga re sa ni pa pani sa ma pani sa
Janani Janma Bhumischa Swargadapi Gariyasi. This verse asks us to treat our motherland as important as our own mother. To understand our motherland better, it is pertinent on ourselves to equip ourselves with the quintessence of Indic knowledge. Indian architecture and Indic knowledge are inseparable. Right from the times of the Stone Age, be the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic ages, to the Indus Valley civilization, to the times of the Mauryas, the Shungas, the Guptas, then later to the Rashtrakutas, Chalukyas, Pallavas, and then to some extent the Gurjara dynasty, the Chandelas of the Bundelkhand, who came under the Chalukyas. To some extent, we have been able to understand what those dynasties meant, who were the prominent kings, and how much they contributed to the architecture. And right from the rock-cut caves of the Barabar Hills, how we went to the stupa style of architecture, then moved to the beautiful ornate pillars within the cave complexes, and then how we carved out of large monolithic stones during the Pallava period, then how beautifully we made cave complexes during the Chalukyas and the Rashtrakutas period, and then how we came to independent structures like the one in Devgad, like the beautiful temples built during the Gurjara time and the Chandelas time, we have seen. In the Chalukya dynasty period, there were also beautiful temples built out of marble. So compared to granite and sandstone, marble is very much easier to get the finer details of the sculptures. So this was largely found and patronized by the kings of the Chalukya dynasty under Vimal Shah. Vimal Shah was a minister of Bhima the First. So the Dilwara temples in Mount Abu. Mount Abu has a very special place in Hinduism because it is called Bhrigu, where we believe the descendants of Bhrigu Maharshi stayed. So the temples called the Dilwara temples of Mount Abu stand as the finest example of how marble architecture has evolved. We have seen granite, we have seen sandstone. Now it's time for us to switch over to marble. Right from the first Tirthankara, who's called Adinatha, to the 22nd, 23rd, the last Tirthankara Mahavira, temples were built. I'll just show you some samples. Now I'm going to show you a picture. If you can see, this is a ceiling. We just saw one example of the ceiling in the Modhera time. So it again came under the Gurjara style. It was beautiful. But this is beyond description. Look at how the sculptures have been fixed on the ceiling, and each concentric circle of the ceiling has a design. Certain designs go within, certain designs come out. So I'm kind of reminded of the temples that I've seen in Luxor in Egypt. So on one side you see how the pharaohs have played a role. On the other side you see how the Romans and Greeks have evolved in architecture. So there are two walls when you go to Luxor. So one will be within, one will come out. So likewise, you find a mix of both here, and look at the way the flower is protruding facing the floor. Amazing. I'm going to show you another picture. This is a pillar, an ornate pillar with beautiful ladies with different postures standing. It could be yogic posture, or they could just be shots of how they dance. But look at the way they stand and look at the polish. Of course, some of you may be wondering, it's marble and why is it not pure white? I would say that this color adds more beauty to it. Nevertheless, see, these have managed to stay for over 1,000 years, so you can't expect them to be pure white, and any kind of chemical wash that is done wouldn't serve the purpose. So let them be the way they are. Let's not spoil them. That's all. Okay, I'll take you back to the grander picture. So we've seen the ceiling, we've seen the ornate pillar, and this is how the entire mandapam looks. So this style was again copied from the Chalukyas in the Dilwara temples to various other places. Now, let me take you to the eastern part of India. I would say east and to some extent southeast as well. It's Odisha, the Kalinga architecture. So let's now visit Parashurameshwara temple. So there is a Vimanam, there is a Garbhagriham, which is called the Sanctum Sanctorum, there is a Bada, and there is a Jagamohana. So this Jagamohana is a very common a feature of most temples in the Kalinga architecture. So that comes beyond the dancing hall, and that's a special hall in front of the Sanctum Sanctorum. That's very special of Kalinga architecture. So this temple that you see of Parashurameshwara temple is dated to the 7th century CE. So we are again going back. So after this, the later temples developed a Nata Mantapa, which is a festival hall, and a Bhoga Mantapa, which is the hall of offerings. Now I'm going to show you a tower and a linga in the temple. First, let me show you a tower. Okay. In this tower, if I can see closer, there is a 6-armed Mahishasura Mardini in the Gavaksha. So the central portion is the Gavaksha, and you find a 6-armed Mahishasura Mardini. So Mahishasura Mardini, the Devi, is coming all along with us, right from the times of the Pallavas in Mamallapuram to we see her in Chalukya architecture in the cave temples, and we're just coming along with Mahishasura Mardini. Can you see it? So it's a beautiful Mahishasura Mardini in the central portion. It's called the Gavaksha in the tower. Again, this is very important. So I mentioned about the Pattadakal complex where I showed you Lord Shiva and Parvati in the Gavaksha. Here it is Mahishasura Mardini in the Gavaksha. This is again very important for us to take it back to Angkor Wat in Cambodia. So Cambodia also you will find, but not exactly in Angkor Wat temple, but in other surrounding temples of Siam Reap. So when we deal with that, I'll explain. Now, you can also see a lingam, and this is just not a simple lingam. It has got various concentric circles that are carved into minor lingams. This is a beauty of the Kalinga architecture. Now I'm going to show you a picture of the Lingaraj complex in Bhubaneswar. It's the landmark of Bhubaneswar, the capital of Odisha. And it was built in the 11th century CE. Nobody misses to attend to this complex. If you go to this complex, you'll find finer details. The shikharas are not that ornate. They have patterns, but they don't have too many sculptures. The sculptures are found beneath. Of course, there is this standing example of Kalinga architecture, the very famous Jagannatha temple in Puri. So this again has a chakram at the top. It's not a kalasham, it's a chakram. So this pattern of Kalinga architecture continues even in the upper districts of Andhra Pradesh. If you go to Sri Kurmam and Bhadrachalam, you find a similar chakram at the top. In fact, a Telugu poet tells, Dhanaru chakramulu dhaga dhaga mere sedi. So there is a Dhanaru chakram at the top. Now, I shall read out a verse. Jambharati bhakumbodbhava miva dadhata sandhra sindura renum rakta sikta ivaughairudaya giritati dhatu dhara dravasya ayantya tulya kalam kamala vana ruche varunavo vibhutyai bhuyasur bhasayanto bhuvanam abhinava bhanavo bhavaniyaha. This is the invocatory verse in a work of Sanskrit called Surya Shatakam, over 100 verses on Surya, written by Mayura Sharman. He was a great poet. He wanted to get rid of an ailment and he wrote this. So where are we going? Now we are going to the zenith of Kalinga architecture. It is a place called Konark. So in the Eastern Ganga dynasty, so that's the Eastern Ganga dynasty. The Western Ganga dynasty was much below. It was in the lower part of Karnataka, whereas Eastern Ganga dynasty was spread across the large parts of Odisha. So in the Eastern Ganga dynasty, we come across many kings. One famous king is Narasimhadeva I, who is said to have ruled between 1238 and 1264 CE. Now I'll show you a wall panel, a stone panel from the Konark temple. Can you see the panel? So in the panel, if you see, there is a person, seems like a royal one. He's seated with the Mahout in the front. The king is seated at the back. Atop the elephant, you can see it. And there is a huge tree. And below the shade of the tree is this elephant. On the other side, you find a giraffe. Can you see the giraffe? You can see some men, it's damaged. But what it seems, looking from the bottom garment, is they could have been tribal people or people who were into business who came to Odisha, this part of the coast, through naval fleets, and they must have been likely from Africa. And you find that they are bartering this giraffe. I don't know for what. It could be for gold, because we had developed the art of extracting gold and making ornaments even then. Probably they were impressed with the yellow metal. We don't know. But there's a bartering that's happening. A giraffe is very new to Indian subcontinent. It's largely an African animal. So this explains the kind of trade that we were engaged in even during those days. Now, this Konark temple is said to have had an Aruna Stambha. Aruna is the elder brother to Garuda. He is the charioteer to Lord Surya. So there is an Aruna Stambha, but not in Konark, which is a Surya temple. Now I'm going to show you a picture of Puri temple again. Before you enter the Puri temple, you find this Stambha. This Aruna Stambha is said to have been in Konark previously, then later it was shifted to Puri. Now, I'm going to take you to the grand picture of Konark temple. So there is a folklore behind how this temple was constructed, and people are indebted to a little boy. So the head architect, the sculptor, was a person called Bishu Maharana. So he was a master architect, and while he left his home because he was commissioned by the king to construct a temple for Surya, his wife was pregnant. So as he engaged the other sculptors in this place, his wife was left to his in-laws' place, and the child was born, and the child started growing up. And every time the child would ask where the father is, the mother would say nice things about the father and would say that he's gone on a project. At one point in time, while he was 12 years of age, the boy was completely vexed and he wanted to see his father. He apparently came to this place and introduced himself to Bishu Maharana as his son. The father was very excited. He was surrounded by the sculptors who were also excited to see their head architect's son. Now, there was a deadline set by the king. It's again a folklore by the king that the Kalasha Sthapana atop the Shikhara should be done on a certain day. And they were very close to it. They had no idea how they were going to keep it so high. So they all developed a chain like Govindas, well, we do during the Janmashtami. And then this boy went atop and placed the Kalasham. But if the king had known that it was the boy and not the sculptor who had placed the Kalasham, probably he would punish. So this boy wanted to kind of relieve them of that stress and fell from the top and died. So he sacrificed for the sake of these architects. So there's a folklore. Now there's no documentation of it, but sounds interesting about how many people have worked really hard, even sacrificing their lives for this temple. And there's another theory which goes, because the boy sacrificed his life, this temple did not survive long and it had to fall prey to the natural forces, which is the sea breeze and invasions. But whatever said and done, this temple looks immensely beautiful. So I'm going to take you to one of the Makara Mukhas. So this is a place from which water comes out. Can you see the Makaram? It's a crocodile. So from its mouth comes the Abhisheka Tirtham. So now it's not in a worshipable state. So the temple is just a monument now. Okay, now I'm going to show you this particular wheel, the entire temple is like a chariot. It is drawn by horses, it is drawn by wheels. And these wheels are really unique. If you look at them, they will have spokes, and there are about 12 wheels to denote the 12 Rashis. And into the wheels, if we look, it is done very, very beautifully with exquisite architecture there too. Something very special about the temple complex itself is, it is said that the main image or deity of the temple, who's Surya Deva, was let to float in the air. So that was done with the help of iron pillars and a magnet below. And later, when invasions happened, the magnet was taken away, and so was the idol. So we believe this is a theory. We don't have too much of information on it, but sounds like an interesting theory. The sailors used to refer to this temple as Black Pagoda. And this temple itself, since it's dedicated to Surya, who's called Arka, and the rays of the sun fall in a certain angle, which is Kona. It's called Kona Arka Konark. And I will take you across to some Naga Devatas who have been represented. See the Naga Devatas. They're alternating each other, and there are beautiful Apsaras trees between. And then there are thin perforations to add to the artistic sense of this temple. So, and there are many panels in the same temple which again have Maithunam scenes, sexually scenes that depict sexual positions. The reasons are the same as much as what I've explained in Khajuraho. So this entire Konark temple, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is like the example of Kalinga architecture. Of course, the Lingaraja temple, the Parashurameshwara temple, many temples in Odisha have a similar architecture, but this is exquisite. It is said that Kalapahad, who was the general of Bengal, Bengal Sultan, he was called Sulaiman Khan Harani. He is said to have ransacked the temple and brought it to ruins. But whatever we see as leftover itself looks so beautiful. Just imagine what it would have been at its zenith, at its peak. So for Eastern Ganga dynasty, we've had an example. Now I'm going to take you way north. I've not taken you that north, but I'm going to take you to a place called Multan, which is in Pakistan. But that's the original Sun Temple that we know of, but we don't know where the Sun Temple is. It is said that Al-Biruni had seen it, but later it disappeared due to invasions or probably some fundamental forces. We don't know. Now I'm going to show you a similar Surya temple called Martanda Surya Temple in Kashmir. It was built by Lalita Aditya Muktapita, who ruled between 725 and 756 CE. He belonged to Karkota dynasty. And interestingly, Karkotaka is the name of a snake, and Takshaka is the name of a snake. They all belong to the same family. They were all children of Kadru, of Kashyapa lineage. So Kashyapa is Kashyapapura, which is Kashmira. And Kashyapa's sons Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha are said to have lived in Multan, which is again Pakistan. Kashyapa's sons are the snakes. So you have Karkotaka, which is a dynasty in Kashmir. And on the northern frontier, we have Takshaka Shila, which is Takshila. So some kind of a connection there. Now, Kalhana's Raja Tarangini speaks very high about the rule of Lalita Aditya Muktapida, who constructed the temple for Surya. It's called Martanda Surya Temple. So first I'm going to show you how this temple would have looked. So have a look at this temple. The larger courtyard is very important again when we discuss Cambodia. So Cambodia is a jamboree of many architectures. So this was done by J. Dugud, who shows the restored impression of the temple, how it would have looked in the best of its days. Well, this is on one side. I'm going to show you how the temple looks today. Can you see it? This is how the temple looks, because today it's reduced to ruins because of invasions. So this is an interesting Surya temple, but we don't know, it's not in a worshipable state because the temple is in ruins. Now I'm going to take you to another dynasty which succeeded the Karkota dynasty. It's called the Utpala dynasty. One of its famous kings was Avanti Swamin, who ruled between 855 and 883 CE. And he constructed the Avantipura temple, said to be a temple for Lord Shiva. Now, this temple was exquisite, very beautiful. And this temple was brought to ruins under the command of Sikandar Shah Miri, who ruled between 1389 and 1413 CE in the neighboring regions, and who meted huge violence on people who refused to follow Islam, and the temples were brought down to ruins. And this is in a place called Avantipura today. And this is, I can show you the picture. This is how the temple looks. It's in ruins again. So I've just given you a sample because most temples there have vanished or in ruins. I've given you two examples in the Kashmir region of the Karkota and the Utpala dynasty. Now we are going from Kashmir to the south of India again. And I'm going to give you a very, very dramatic opening. Not because I want to, because this dynasty is such. Along with the Cheras and the Pandyas, there was another dynasty which was called the Trio, and that was the Cholas. The Chola dynasty extended around Kaveri, the river, and went up till Tungabhadra, which is in Karnataka, Telangana, and Andhra. So they were ruling that region. They were a military economic powerhouse in Southeast Asia. The Chola dynasty was a powerhouse. The Chola fleet represented the zenith of Indian sea power in ancient India. So if there is a word called navy and what navy looked like, Cholas established that. And now when I speak of Cholas, you must remember Cholas were one of the dynasties which did not stick only to the south and east of India or west of India. They went to Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, which is Kambuja Desha, Myanmar, and here down below they went to Sri Lanka, Maldives. One of the very multinational dynasties of India undoubtedly has been the Chola dynasty, and they have been very, very ancient as well. I'll tell you how. So we have the Ashokan edicts which have been found in the north of India, very, very reliable and very valued by historians and archaeologists. So around the 3rd century BC, roughly 2300 to 400 years from now, before, we have the mention of Cholas there. So when they mention about the regions of the south, they say Kerala Putras, who are the Cheras, and the Cholas. The second reference is in the 1st century CE. We have the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea by the Greek person, a manuscript on the navigation and the trading opportunities. Cholas find a mention there too. And again, they find a mention by Ptolemy. And then in Mahavamsha, which is a huge Buddhist text from Sri Lanka in the 5th century CE. So right from the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE to the 5th century CE, Cholas have lived for that long. But we don't have much information on who were the Cholas then, except for a few names like Kochenganan, Karikalan, and so on. So I'll show you a map to depict what this Periplus of the Erythraean Sea by the Greek person was. You can see the routes. So there are routes which show the naval way as well as the land route. So you can find a lot of areas marked in the south of India, especially in Tamil Nadu, denoting that they knew of the Cholas. Besides references to Cholas in these edicts and inscriptions, there are multiple references in Sangam literature, which is a very valued early Tamil literature. So when I'm going to talk about the literature from the regional languages, I'm going to give a lot of dedication to time to Sangam literature. Now, about the early Cholas, we don't have much information. But where does the real Chola dynasty, the imperial Cholas, the Cholas whom we have a lot of information about, begin? So we have a person called Vijayalaya, who is said to have ruled between 848 and 891 CE. He was feudatory under the Pallavas, who took advantage of the conflict between Pandyas and the Pallavas. So the Pandyas and the Pallavas were always in conflict. So the feudatory of the Pallavas were the Cholas. They were not the kings in those days. But they took advantage and captured Tanjavur from a small community who were managing the tier 2 towns. So they were called Muttarayar. So they captured Tanjavur, a small town, and made it their capital. So Aditya I, Aditya I, 891 to 907 CE was his regime. He caused the demise of Pallava. So they were initially feudatories under Pallavas, and later they declared independence, and they caused the demise of Pallava and defeated the Pandyas. And Aditya the first expanded Chola Empire north, south, east, west. And he had marital ties with the Western Ganga dynasty, which was in the southern part of Karnataka. Now, the other three kings who are very important to us, first is Parantaka the first. Between 907 and 950 CE was his rule. He conquered Lanka. So that was our first expedition to Lanka. Of course, we have references to Ashoka having good terms, was in good terms in the good books of the kings of Sri Lanka, but we don't know if there was the establishment of our dynasty. So Cholas conquered Lanka. See, when I say other forces invaded India and Cholas conquered Lanka, there is a difference. We conquered, but we didn't invade. There is a difference. We wanted that land also to prosper, and we didn't want to change the religious landscape or demographics of that land. That's very unique. He, Parantaka the first, also defeated Krishna the two of the Rashtrakuta dynasty. So the Pallavas, the Pandyas, the Rashtrakutas, everybody, they started surrendering to the Cholas. Now came the best of the kings. Probably you can rate him as one of the top 10 kings of the entire Indian history. His name was Rajaraja the First. He ruled between 985 and 1014 CE. He was the greatest of all Chola kings. His governance, his control, his centralization, his understanding of urban planning, his understanding of architecture, his patronizing of literature, his triumph over every war where he went was marvelous, and he's a nulli secundus. Now, his son too, who was called Rajendra the First, who ruled between 1012 and 1044 CE, was also equally talented. He conquered Odisha. He defeated the Palas in West Bengal. So Pala dynasty is a very important dynasty. So I won't be talking much about the Palas because of the paucity of time. See, Palas of the West Bengal, when I say West Bengal, they also occupied a large part of the northeast and Bangladesh. So the Palas ruled for a very long time. The best is probably, if you look at the Unakoti in Tripura, example, you have later Palas, you have the Bishnupur terracotta temples, beautiful. So these Palas were defeated. He reached the Ganga waters because Ganga reaches even Bengal, right? So he picked up Ganga waters and brought it down to his state of Tamil Nadu, and that place was called Gangai Konda Cholapuram later. Now, this Rajendra the First, the son of Rajaraja the First, expanded Chola dynasty to Indonesia, the archipelago nation, and he defeated the Sri Vijaya dynasty there, conquered Sri Lanka, conquest of Rattapadi. Rattapadi is a Tamil word which denotes Rashtrakuta, Chalukya, Talakat, Kolar. So Chola dynasty is immensely strong. We will look at the architecture, before which something very unique, which I have not done in this course of architecture sessions. I'm going to show you this picture. Can you see this? This is of course renovated. The earlier form of this dam is called Kallanai. Kallanai. Anai means bridge. Kal means stone. So the earliest of the Chola kings, called Karikala, is said to have built a dam for irrigation. So dam is at least 1400 years old in India, the concept of dam, and that was first made by the Cholas. Now, I'm going to take you to one of the landmarks of Dravidian architecture. It's called the Brihadishwara temple, which is now more than 1000 years since its construction. It's a living legend. It's a living wonder of this world. It's a Chola temple. It's a worshipable Chola temple. Lord Shiva is worshipped. It's built in pure granite. The beauty is it's built in pure granite, a mammoth temple, a big temple. But you cannot find a single hillock, forget a mountain or a hill, even a hillock, in about 50 kilometers or miles of radius around Tanjavur. It's still a question where he got the granite from. So you find the tallest Vimana, not the Gopuram. Gopuram is the gateway. This is above the Garbhagraham, the tallest Vimana ever made during those times. It reaches a height of 208 feet. The lingam inside the temple, the sanctum sanctorum, the Garbhagraham, is the largest Shivalinga. Rajaraja the First commissioned this temple and he called it Rajarajeshwaram. He renovated this temple in the next 1,000 years. See, the renovation happened after that. And in the last, after the 1,000 years, we had a huge ceremony in Tamil Nadu. There is a Vimanam to the temple. There is a Nandi Mandapam to the temple. There is a Mukhamandapam, Mahamandapam, and Ardhamandapam to the temple. First, I'm going to show you the temple. This is the rare part of the temple. Can you see? So there is a sub-shrine, and then you see the Shikhara at the top, people walking in and around there doing a Pradakshinam. So if you look at the size of the people standing and sitting, you can understand how big the temple is. And this was 1,000 years before, mind you. Now, how did this Rajaraja the first look? So here is a small snippet of how his bronze statue of Rajaraja looks. I would seriously, if it was time travel, I would like to meet this king. Now, the side view of the temple again, when you do the Pradakshinam again. So look at the levels of the Shikhara. So there is a Shikhara before which there are 3 levels, openings. And below that is the Garbhagriham, and then the Natamandapam, the Ardhamandapam, and so on. So now I'm going to take you to one picture that you're going to see. Can you see the picture? They are the inscriptions on the walls of the temple. So the inscriptions of Brihadishwara temple are very unique. One inscription states that this is a Dakshina Meru. So there is believed to be Meru in Sanatana Dharma, the mountain. And some say it could be the Pamir mountains near the Karakoram range. Now this is the Dakshina Meru. So they say this Brihadishwara temple is Dakshina Meru. Brihat in Sanskritam means something which is large, big, mammoth. So you call it BMC, Brihat Mumbai Corporation, right? Brihat is big. Brahmam is Brihatvacha, Brahmanatvacha, Brihat Ishvara, big Ishvara. So the inscriptions are so detailed in this temple that they say what all things the king commissioned for the regular worship of Shiva in this temple. So there are various sub-shrines to this temples, and he says what all ornaments were made for every deity, and he mentions how many grams of gold was used for every ornament, how many emeralds were used, how many rubies were used. So the inscriptions are exquisite. There is one inscription which states that this entire temple was covered in gold. Will you believe? It was covered in gold. We don't know what happened, whether it's an exaggeration, an atishayokti, or a reality. So Brihadishwara temple was covered in gold, states one inscription. Now, as we lead to the Garbhagriham, there are stairs, and look at the sides of the stairs. So there is I'm going to show you a picture of this elephant. See, this is an elephant in the stone. A similar monolith stone is also done in Mahabalipuram. There are holes on either sides of the elephant. It is believed that after wars, the ivory tusks, the real ivory tusks were brought and fit into the stone elephant's openings. So it used to give them a real feeling. What thought process those sculptors had, honestly, I don't know whether we have that skill with so much of technological advancement today. I'm sure we can't even do 10% justice to this temple. Okay, this is a very famous representation of Lord Shiva in most South Indian temples. It's called Bhikshatana. So it is said that he took away the 5th head of Brahma and that Kapalam stuck to him. So he went on seeking alms from various people to get rid of the Kapalam, the skull. So it's a Bhikshatana. Can you see Bhikshatana there? And in most forms, he is semi-naked or naked. So that's Bhikshatana. I'm going to show you the Ardhanarishwara. So if you look at Ardhanarishwara, on one half, this is very famous in the Chola bronzes. When I'm going to discuss the subject on metallurgy, I'll talk about Chola bronzes. It's very famous. So on one half, you've got the male, the other half, Parvati, the female. You've got Nandi behind. You've got the Trishulam. You've got attendants on both sides. This is Ardhanarishwara. And now I'm going to take you to the Shikhara, the Vimanam again, where we have the depiction of Nrisimha tearing open and fighting with Hiranyakashipu. Look at the life-size image with so much of life in it. So he has hands on one side, a set of hands on the other side. With one hand, he's holding the demon straight in the neck. And that man's tusks, the Damshtra's tusks are visible, and his tongue is also out. Now, with the other hand, the Lord is holding his abdomen. Now, the demon has a shield in his hand, And on the other hand of the demon that is being controlled by the Lord's other hand, he is raising his hand to hit this demon. The demon is terrified and petrified at this. Look at the weapons and the intricacy that has gone into the making. Look at the shield. It has got, see, this Narasimha is atop the Vimana, which nobody can see, but they were not bothered about who's seeing or not seeing. They wanted to be perfect. Now look at a Gajalakshmi. Now let's go to the temple. Let's look at Gajalakshmi. See, we have seen a Gajalakshmi in the seated posture with legs extended downwards of Mahabalipuram of the Pallavas. Then we went to Rashtrakutas in the Ellora temple where we saw her with folded legs. Again with folded legs here. But she's served by two women. There is a Chatram. There is a tree above. There are Apsaras on both sides. There are elephants on both sides denoting she's Gajalakshmi. Right? So this is again very, very beautiful. But the difference between this Gajalakshmi and the Gajalakshmi we saw of the Pallavas, you can find a lot of detailing happening with this Lakshmi and not so much there. Well, again, I'm taking you back to the Vimanam. You can see Krishna seated above the tree with clothes of the Gopikastris. The Gopikastris are naked. They are requesting for the clothes from Krishna. So this is a depiction of Vastrapaharanam. Vatsapaharanam is by Brahma. This is Vastrapaharanam by Krishna. Now look at one of the steps leading to the main shrine. Look at what is done below. Look at the detailing that's done. And immensely beautiful. If you can see the lower panel, on the rightmost corner, you can see Lord Shiva is marrying Parvati and the other deities are helping and wishing the couple good luck. Okay, now I'm going to show you the gateway to this entire complex. It's a Gopuram. So the Gopuram's concept began in the Kailashanatha temple during Pallava period, around the 7th century. It was a very small Gopuram, which was the opening. Now it started growing during the Cholas time. Now it has grown immensely. Look at the size of the people and then you will know the size of the Gopuram. Then during the Vijayanagara period, it grew huge. Like 13 tier, 11 tier Gopurams, and then during the Nayaka period, it reached its zenith. So if somebody has to see South Indian temples, the first thing that comes across to their mind is the Gopuram. This is a simple one compared to the ones that we're going to see later. Now going back to the Vimanam atop the Garbhagriham, you can see I've taken a close-up of this picture of the top. Now this top portion of that slab that you can see, with the Kiriti Mukham and all that, that particular portion is said to be 80 tons, which is 80,000 kgs. So we don't know how they placed this particular monolith atop the Vimanam, because the Vimanam is 208 feet. It is said that a gradient was constructed 6 miles distance. So from a place called Papanasham, there was this gradient constructed for the elephants, over 500 to 1,000 elephants, to pull this particular monolith and place it on the Vimanam. I can't explain or probably even imagine, but this is the theory given. Now, this Rajaraja, the first Brihadishwara temple, had a photocopy or a clone made later by his son Rajendra the first in Gangai Konda Cholapuram. Gangai Konda Cholapuram means he won over the Palas in West Bengal and brought the Ganga waters to say that I won over the Gangas too. So this Rajendra the first wanted to emulate his father. After winning over many dynasties in the Bengal Palas, he asked all of them to send pots of Ganga waters and poured them into the well. So this is how it got its name, Gangai Konda Cholapuram. Now I'm going to show you the first picture. If you can see, this is the opening. So it's not a completed Gopuram. Probably he left it for the remaining Chola emperors to do, but then there was a decline of Chola dynasty after Kulothunga's time. So there you see the Vimanam. Once you get closer to the Vimanam, the next picture I can show you, you have a mammoth-sized Nandi, because the Nandi of Brihadishwara temple was constructed much later. But this is a Nandi which was constructed by Rajendra the first himself. Now look at the Vimanam. It is not as tall as Brihadishwara, and it is not as grand as his father's Vimanam as well, but he wanted to mimic his father. Now I'm going to take you to the ruins of the palace. See, remember, the kings wanted to have strong temples that would last for millenniums in granite and sandstone for the Lord, whereas for themselves they constructed simple palaces made of brick and wood, so they could be dismantled at any point in time. Our kings, they did not live exactly a king-size life. They were aristocrat, they had comforts, but today we see that the temples are abandoned, they are damaged, whereas the ruling class is in all luxury. But kings were not those days. Look at the ruins of the palace there. Can you even imagine there was a palace here? So this was a capital for over 250 years. Now, I'll take you to another befitting example of Chola architecture. So the two examples that we have seen of Rajaraja the first and Rajendra the first, after some period came Rajaraja the second. So this temple is neither as big in area nor height like Brihadishwara and Gangaikonda Cholapuram of the two Chola kings, but this Airavatishwara temple in Darasuram. So when I'm going to discuss the weaves, I'm going to talk about Darasuram too. It's very famous for its silk. So this was built by Rajaraja the second. Very exquisite. I'm going to show you an overview of this temple. Can you see this temple? So again, can you connect it with Konark? There are wheels to this temple, and there are horses and there are elephants. Now I'm going to take you to a closer look of the mandapam. So look at the wheels. Look at the horses that are drawing, and on the other side there is this elephant. So if you look top to the mandapam, you can see there are pillars, and the lower part of the pillar is an animal. Pallava pillars had lions. Here it was a unique combination of having a lion with the trunk of an elephant. So some call it Yali, some say it's not Yali, it was some other animal. In whichever case, it's very unique. So this style was completely dedicated to the later Cholas, especially by Rajaraja II. Now, can you see this picture? Can you tell me what these two animals are? So if you look from the left, it looks like a bull. Am I right? It looks like a bull which has its head upwards. Look from the right side. Isn't it an elephant whose trunk is folded? So this is the hallmark of Chola architecture, where they could view, and this is all in granite. And you know what is the height of what I'm showing you now is? It's the height of a pen. What we have seen is mammoth structure, but here what I'm showing is the height of a pen. So in this height, they have managed to use granite and get the combination of two animals done. What can I explain? So this is how the pillar looks. I spoke about the pillar. And now the other pillars in the temple also have a lot of handwork, detailing done. So there are mini shrines here. Probably this could have been the idea for Vijayanagaras when they did the Vithala temple later. When we discuss Vijayanagara, I'll show you there. So the hall is modeled in this particular Darasuram Airavatishwara temple after Chidambaram and Konark. Chidambaram is famous for Natarajaswamy temple of Shiva, where he is the cosmic dancer, and Konark of the Surya temple, where there is a dance hall too. So Chola dynasty, there is much more to say, but I've just shown you three examples, the best of examples. Well, let me go slightly northwards, not when I say north, not completely north, north to the Cholas. I'm going to go back to Karnataka. So it is said that there was a person called Sala who saved his Jain Guru. His Jain Guru was Sudatta. He saved his Jain Guru Sudatta when he saw a tiger which was about to pounce on his Guru, and he encountered that tiger and struck that. Some say tiger, some say lion, whichever. Now, as he encountered to strike something in Hale Kannada, which is old Kannada, is Hoy. Since it was done by this man called Sala, they got the name Hoysalas. So I'll show you the depiction of this Sala who's piercing that lion. Some say tiger, here we have a lion. So can you see, this is a very, very known depiction of Hoysala dynasty. This is their emblem. Now, Hoysalas, they called themselves descendants of Yadavas. They were traditionally from Malenadu. Malenadu means from the Western Ghats. So, of the kings, Vishnuvardhana was a very, very powerful king of the Hoysalas, and later Veerabhallala the second was very powerful. The first example of Hoysala architecture is Beluru in Karnataka, very close to Bangalore. Beluru was built during Vishnuvardhana's period, which lasted between 1108 and 1152. He ruled for a very long time. 3 generations had to construct this temple. It took 103 years to finish. I'll show you how the temple looks from the back. Can you see the temple? Look at the layers and look at the detailing. Something very special about the Hoysalas, as I'm going to explain, you will note. Look at the detailing. Now I'll show you a detailed structure of the panels. See, look at the panels. Every row has some detailing. There are elephants, it's plain then there's plain then, again there is a row with detailing there. Then there are circles, then there is detailing, and then there are mini shrines, then there are dancing girls, again there are mini shrines, and then there are pillars. Look at the detailing, it's there throughout the temple. So there are crores of elephants which have been carved, crores of horses which have been carved. I'm going to take you to the window. Not exactly the windows, you can call them the perforations that would let light and air in. If you can see this panel, this picture, on one side of the pillar you have simple perforations with some basic designs. On the other side of the pillar you've got representation of a certain story. You've got a flute playing Krishna. You've got a Vali and Sugriva fighting. You've got an elephant which is being attended to by a Mahoth. And look at the slanting ladies in slightly a different color carved in stone at the top. I don't want to explain it further. Just look at the picture. If you're not amazed by this, if you can't appreciate by this, I'm sorry for being rude. God help us. What kind of craftsmanship did Hoysalas have? I'm simply amazed. I don't know, I get goosebumps when I speak about them. So here is another picture of a lady who's standing with a bow. And look at her pose. Her legs are so casual. Look at her bosoms. Look at her face. Look at her tatankam, what she's wearing in her ears. And look at the creepers above her head. And look at the minute work that has gone into the creepers. Look at her bangles and armlets, if you can see them. Look at the bangle, they are thin. They are like Bengali designs of the bangles that you see today. Bengali designs of bangles are flat in certain areas. Look at her girdle. It's called Mekhala. There's a Kirti Mukha. And then there are rows. Beautiful. Now, you can also see 2 ladies attending to her at her feet. And look at her anklet. This is just one. There are thousands of such ladies. No wonder it took 103 years. I'm going to show you another lady in another casual form. To me, it seems as if she's plaiting her hair or drying her hair after the head bath. This is inside the temple from Beluru. So it's not exposed to sun. So it has maintained its luster. It's more shiny in nature. Look at this lady. Okay, now I'm going to go again outside the temple. I'm going to show you the hallmarks of a lady. She's called Darpana Sundari. Darpanam in Sanskrit is a mirror. So be the man or the woman. We love to see ourselves in the mirror. Maybe women may like it more. Look at this lady. She's looking at the mirror. Of course, we don't know if it is polished. It's a simple mirror. It's not the real mirror. But we also had the art of developing a mirror form during the Indus Valley period, and that art still continued in a place called Aranmula in Kerala. When I talk about metallurgy, I'm going to talk about that. So look at this lady. Can you see the detailing that has gone over the creepers? Look at the creepers. You won't even know where they started and where they ended the work on these creepers. Beautiful. Extremely beautiful. Now, another lady. She's again holding the bow and she's attending to the ladies. So this is very similar to the one we have seen before. This is on the other side of the temple. I'll take you to another lady who's having a manuscript and a pen. So she is casually looking at people and saying, yes, my writing is over. Look at me, guys. Look at her. Now I'll show the interiors of the temple, something very famous the Hoysalas wear, where the lathe turned pillars. Look at the pillars. It looks as if somebody has used exquisite and high-end machines to get these pillars done. Okay. Now, again within outside the temple complex, I showed you the ladies, right? This is how they are slanted. So from the bottom, when I look, there are panels, and the ladies are in a slanting position. Look at the roof of the temple. It's full. It's not in one corner. The entire temple's roof is done like this. Now, when we move towards the Garbhagraham, in Kannada there is a saying, Beluru Olagade, Halebeedu Horagade. So if you have to enjoy the beauty of Belur, go inside. I've shown you most of the outside, and they say outside is just okay. Whatever I've shown, they say outside is just okay. If you have to see the beauty of Belur, go inside. So if outside what we have seen, it's just okay, what the inside is going to be, look at the Torana above the Garbhagraham. So there is Lakshmi and Narayana. There are makaras on either sides. Look at the Toranam. Toranam is something where you hang flowers or leaves. And there are perforations. So the ladies below the Lord, they're all playing instruments, and there are perforations. It's not a panel. You can let a lot of pieces of cloth within. So it's, if suppose I can keep a red background at the back, you will know the beauty of this panel. So how does this panel look? I'm going to give you a far view. So you can see the Dwarapalakas. Looking at the Dwarapalakas, I get a feeling that they are Narayanas themselves. And now you can see a lady to the left, Dwarapalakas, and then a lady to the left. I'm going to zoom into the lady. They say, some historians opine this could be Mohini Avataram of the Lord. One of the only avatarams where he has come as a woman. Look at the poise with which Mohini stands. So I'm done with Beluru, which is one example of the Hoysalas. Now I'm going to go to Halebeedu. Halebeedu was once the capital of the Hoysalas. So you've got a Shiva temple there. We had a Vishnu temple in Beluru of Chennakeshava Swami. Now we're going to Shiva temple of Halebeedu under the Hoysalas. It's Hoysaleshwara temple, very close to Beluru, very close to Bangalore. So if you're going to make a trip to Bangalore, plan for a day to Beluru, Halebeedu. So all that we have seen of Hoysalas, this architecture, this detailing is possible because it's not granite. Remember, in granite, you can't do this detailing. Even in sandstone, you can't. In marble, you can. But more than marble, in my opinion, it is this stone which gives that value, which is soapstone. So this was sponsored by Vishnuvardhana. The temple was started in 1121 CE and completed in 1160 CE. It is a Dvikuta Vimanam. So there are two temples attached to each other, both of them facing the same direction, both Shiva. They open to the east. Now I'm going to show you how this panel looks. So the artwork on the outer walls of the temple are in, first, what is indicated by one is a marching set of playful elephants. You can see that elephants. And trust me, each elephant is different. Second layer of lions. Third, of the thin miniature scroll. So if you, it's a thin miniature. It's not any animal, it's just a scroll. So you've dealt with too many animals, too much of anything is going to be boring. So it's miniature scroll. And then fourth is the horsemen in different postures. Each horseman is going to show a different expression. Fifth, thin miniature scroll again. Sixth, friezes narrating legends from the Hindu text. So if you look at 6, it will talk about Ramayana, Mahabharatam, and so on. 8, simple. Now birds, hamsas and peacocks. So we are moving from animals to birds because they can fly high. So as we go high, we are talking about the aerial creatures. Then 9, there are professionals, daily life of people alternately standing and sitting. So how do I tell people that you have to work? So these are the easiest ways. 10, mythical creatures. So there could be Yali, there could be the head of a trunk of an elephant, body of a lion, and so on. Then there are festivals and ceremonies shown. 11, Artha Kama Dharma scenes. So there will be Maithuna scenes like how we have seen in Odisha and Khajuraho, explaining various sexual positions. And then there is various occupations which is shown, and lastly 12 large image panels, beautiful image panels. So this is from Halebeedu. Now I'll show you one particular image. Let's take Mahishasura Mardhini here. So she's pressing the buffalo. So this could be the 6th or the 7th Mahishasura Mardhini. Mahishasura Mardhini, Adivaraha, Rama, and Bhikshatana. These are very common in most Hindu temples of the ancient India. So look at Mahishasura Mardhini here. Now I'm going to show you another panel. Can you see this? On the right side, you see 7 trees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. there is an arrow which is penetrating the trees. There's a cut in the trees because of the arrow, and the other person at the end is holding a bow. That is Rama. From Ramayana, there is a scene where Sugriva tells that to fight my brother, you have to prove your valor, Rama. That is when he does by shooting the sala trees. And here we have Sugriva and the other monkeys looking amazed at it. On the left hand side, what is it? It could be, I'm just thinking, it could be Rama and Lakshmana who are seated. On one corner is Angada. One who's standing close to Rama could be Hanuman, who's accepting the ring before going to Lanka. And looking at Hanuman get it, Sugriva and his other friend are amazed. And to commemorate this, we have two other monkeys holding and hitting the plates. So probably you will know it better, but if I explain, probably you will find that the sculpture is actually talking to you. The sculptures have to talk to you. Now I'll show you another panel. Look at this panel. So there is a dancing goddess. Go further from the left. Second image, you find Krishna holding the snake. It's Kaliya Nardhana, could be Kaliya Nardhana. Then I'm not sure what it is. I'm not able to clearly visualize that. Then there is a Nartana Ganapati of Vinayaka Ganesha. Then there is a Mahishasura Mardhini. In fact, it's Kali because she's holding the head of an Asura on one hand. She has Trishulam in the other. So it is the ferocious form of Durga. It's Kali. And then next is Krishna playing the flute. So interestingly, Kali and Krishna. Kali is the one who's dark. Krishna is also dark. They are placed next to each other. Now I'm going to show you how the Dwarapalakas look here in Halebeedu. Can you see this Dwarapalaka? So I have been here in my childhood. While I studied in Bangalore in school, we were taken on an excursion to Halebeedu. The guide used to put a thin, it was amazing then and even now. So he takes a thin stick and puts it between all these decoration and ornate thing that is done on the mekhala, in that huge dress that is covering the thighs. So thin wires or sticks can go. So there are perforations within. Now, how does the hall within the temple look? So this is how the hall looks. Perfectly polished, shining to the core. Now, I'm going to take you to another temple. So we are done with Beluru and Halebeedu of Hoysala dynasty. The Hoysala dynasty reached its zenith. The climax of Hoysala architecture happens in Chennakeshava temple in Somanathapura, which is again very close to Bengaluru. So a general called Somanatha Dandanayaka, who was under Narasimha III in 1258 CE, he finished the temple. And he called it the climax of Hoysala architecture. He even gave this Agrahara to various Vedic Pandits. Now, many temples were built in this town, but they have disappeared due to severe invasions from the north of India. This temple was also equally damaged, and later it was rebuilt during Vijayanagara Empire. So it's a special soapstone called the chloristic schist, which is green-gray in the quarry and then becomes soft and slowly hardens as when used. So it's best suited for carving and sculpting. So now I'll show you what is there outside the temple. There's a large tower. There used to be a Garuda atop this tower, which is missing today. Now I'm going to show you this temple. Can you see the temple? This is the temple of Chennakeshava Swami in Somanathapura. So you see two towers on either sides. The tower in the central part is visible only when you do a pradakshina. So it's a raised platform. Now, how do the miniature temple reliefs be like? Now you see this panel. So you also find various sexual positions, again, Maithuna scenes in one panel. When you come from the top, you find that panel having those scenes. Then below that, you've got miniature temples. You find miniature shikharas or vimanas and deities housed within it. Below that, again, another panel. Below that, another workmanship. I can't describe this. You have to see it to feel it. Now, I'm going to show you how Lakshmi and Vishnu look. Vishnu is carrying Chakram and Shankham. In fact, in Hoysala architecture, very special mention, Vishnu would have reversed his weapons. So if he's going to carry Chakram in most figures here, in Hoysala it will be Shankham and Chakram. This one is very rare. Now you see a Nartana Ganapati. So with such a bulky size, he's able to lift with his 1 foot and keep his 1 foot downwards. So look at this. This is very unique. It's Kamadeva, it's Kandarpa, because Kamadeva is the Lord Cupid. So he has Ikshu as the bow, sugarcane as the bow, and flowers as the arrows. So they could be Rati Devi on one side and some other attendants like Vasanta and so on from the other side. Now, I'll take you to Saraswati. This is Saraswati for us. She has Japamala, she has manuscript on one hand. Well, can you see what's there in her front two hands? It's partly broken. It's a veena. So today we understand veena to have two half pumpkins on either ends. That's a veena that was designed in the 16th and the 17th century under the Nayaka time in the south of India. The veena that we know of in the ancient times was not like this. We don't know how it was, but an idea is people say it could have been something like the iktara that they play in the north of India, simple like that. So this is a Krishna who was placed in the Garbhagraham of this temple. It was a makeshift position because the original murti of Krishna from this temple was stolen during the invasions. Now I'm going to take you to a series of ceilings in the temple. So you must have heard in botany of inflorescence. For example, if you take a jackfruit, you'll find many small fruits within it. So, and if you look at the flower of a banana tree, it opens like that. So you have banana flower like architecture here in the ceiling. So one looks like that banana, one looks like a lotus flower. This is all extremely carved. And this one, especially this one, look at the snake coil like structure on the ceiling. Where does it start? Where does it end? And all this is not done with Fevicol. They didn't have a gum material. How they did that? I don't know. If you have answers, you can answer. I don't have an answer. Then finally, this ceiling. This is very simple. It looks like the Modhera one. The ones that we have seen of Hoysala is extremely beautiful. Now, I'm going to come to another dynasty. It's called the Kakatiya dynasty. So it is said to be named after a Durga's form called Kakati. Some historians say it is named after a village by name Kakati. So they were called Kakatiya dynasty. It lasted for a period of time. And they trace their predecessors to the Solar dynasty, Raghuvamsham, Surya Vamsham. They are said to have served as generals under Rashtrakutas and later as feudatory chiefs of the Chalukyas and later declared independence. They largely ruled around Andhra Pradesh, around a city which was at one point in time in Telugu, the language was called Orugallu. Orugallu. Oru in Telugu means one. Eka. Gallu is Shila, which is stone. Ekashila Nagaram, which is a city of one stone. Ekashila in Telugu is Orugallu. Orugallu became Varangallu. So it's called Varangal today. So we have certain kings in this dynasty. The famous ones, Prataparudra I. There was a detailed account on this king. It's called Prataparudriyam. Kausalyaye Prathama Janani Devaki cha Dvitiya Vishnor Mata Tadanu Vasata Mummadamba Tritiya is a verse that commemorates the birth of this king. So he ruled between 1158 and 1195 CE. Then we had Mahadeva, who ruled between 1195 and 1199 CE. The very famous Ganapati Deva, 1199 to 1262 CE. Then one of the very celebrated queens of Indian history, Rudramma Devi, between 1262 and 1289 CE. Then Prataparudra II between 1289 and 1323 CE. After this, the dynasty had completely declined. I will tell you why later. It was the biggest invasion known in Indian history. Okay, now I'm going to show you the Kakatiya Kalatoranam in the Varangal fort. This is how it looks. Doesn't it remind you of Sanchi Stupa's gateway? Though they are years, millennium apart. How did they get this idea? In my understanding, I could be wrong. They would have had an inspiration from some of the stupas built in Amaravati in Andhra, because when Buddhists were persecuted by the Shungas, they shifted to Deccan under the Andhra rule. So maybe Kakatiya would have been inspired of that. Now I'm going to take you to a classic temple of this Kakatiya dynasty. It's called the Ramalingeshwara temple, constructed by Richerla Rudra. He was a general under Ganapati Deva. This temple was constructed in 1213 CE. And interestingly, this temple is called Ramalingeshwara because it has got Shiva as Ramalingeshwara, but this temple is not called Ramalingeshwara temple. You know what is it called? It's called Ramappa temple because it is named after the head sculptor cum architect called Ramappa, one of the earliest temples to have been named after the craftsman. Now it is built of sandstone and also basalt. So it has sensuous postures and elongated bodies in their heads. So in Beluru, Halebeedu, they were all perfectly chiseled and nice round faces. You'll find elongated faces here. I'll take you to one sculpture. So when I've shown you this picture of the temple, you find some black, large monoliths sticking between the pillar and the roof. I want to take you to a close-up. You see this lady? This lady has, if you look closer, doesn't it seem like she's wearing footwear with heels? We don't know if they were just padukas or with heels. Look at her face, very long, slender waist. Look at her dress, simple, but with whatever minimal embroidery could be done on that work. The coverings of this lady atop is not as grand as the Hoysalas, but we're very close to it. Now I want to take you to another lady. She's depicting a mudra from a classical dance. Either it could be Bharatanatyam or Kuchipudi. Women are playing mridangam at the bottom. Look at that shine. How it has managed to remain for 800 years with that shine is, look at her fingers at the top. Beautiful, beautiful. Now I want to take you to one of the pillars inside the temple. Look at the pillars. One row has instruments being played by women in various postures below. And trust me, you can put a stick from one perforation and take it out from the other. So if I have to summarize what I've spoken till now, because there is going to be a major turning incident and then we are going to deal with one of the last dynasties. Now, till now we have discussed the Mauryan dynasty that lasted between 322 and 180 BCE, famous rulers Chandragupta and Ashoka. Shunga dynasty, 185 to 775 BCE, very famous Pushyamitra Shunga. Satavahanas between 100 BCE and 2nd century CE, Shatakarnis, they were very famous. Gupta dynasty between 319 and 550 CE, Samudragupta, Chandragupta II, Kumaragupta II, very famous. Western Ganga dynasty between 350 and 999 CE. The Chalukyas, the first type, the Badami Chalukyas, between 500 and 753 CE, roughly their regime. Pulikeshin, the first, Vikramaditya, the second. Then Pallava dynasty between 575 and 897 CE, Mahendravarman the first, Narasimhavarman first and second, Nandivarman the second. So these kings that I'm mentioning, there could be more kings who are much better, but I'm seeing from the architecture point of view as well. Gurjara Pratihara dynasty, 730 to 1036 CE. We just saw an example of Modhera. And then we saw the Rashtrakuta, 735 to 997 CE, Danti Durga, Krishna the first, Amoghavarsha the first. Then we dealt with the very famous Chola dynasty, 848 to 1279 CE, Rajaraja the first, Rajendra the first, Rajaraja the second. Then Chaulukya dynasty between 940 and 1244 CE, we had Bhima the first. So I made a mistake in Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. We are talking about their feudatory chiefs called Chandelas who had the construction of the Khajuraho, and now we're dealing with Chaulukyas. Bhima the first is where Modhera comes into picture. Then Kalyani Chalukyas between 957 and 1200 CE, Someshwara the first and Vikramaditya the sixth. Then Eastern Ganga dynasty between 980 and 1434 CE. Eastern Ganga is all Kalinga. So we had, if I'm right, Narasimha Deva there. Then Hoysala architecture, 1026 and 1343 CE. Vishnuvardhana is a very famous king who had the Belur, Halebeedu constructed. Kakatiya between 1158 and 1323 CE. Ganapati Deva is very famous. And I did make some flying references to Karkota dynasty, Utpala dynasty from Kashmir, Palas from Bengals, Pandyas and Cheras from Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So Pandyas, one of the best examples of Pandyan architecture is the Vettuvan Kovil in the south of India. Cheras, I would say, in my opinion, the Vadakkunnathan temple in Thrissur, Kudal Manikyam temple in Irinyalakuda in Kerala. So very fine examples of Chera architecture. Now, the next episode, we are going to see a turning point in the Indian history that led to the establishment of one of the very powerful dynasties and very influential dynasties in India. So till then, keep mulling over this thought that we have had a very, very rich civilization and a very, very rich architecture. Namaste.
ma pa ni sa re ma pa ni sa ga re pa ma ma ga ga re sa ga ma ga re ni pa ma ma pa ni ga re ni ma ga re sa ni sa ga re ma ga re sa ni pa pa ni sa ma pa ni sa re ma pa ni sa ga re ni pa ma ga re ma pa sa ni pa ma ga re sa ni pa ma ga re sa ga re ma ga re sa ni pa pa ni sa ma pa ni sa re ma pa ni sa ga re ni pa ma ga re ma pa sa ni pa ma ga re sa ni pa ma ga re pa ni sa pa ni sa re ma pa ni re ma pa ni pa ma ga re sa ga re ma pa ni sa.
Namaskaram. As we have mentioned at the commencement, all you Sishyas have been very punctual and very sincere. My namaskarams for that sincerity. In the 19th and the 20th e-lessons, you will be able to download the e-certificate. So this e-certificate is a generic letter of appreciation. That's all. It is not the customized one that you may get for a bachelor's or a master's degree. This is just a token of appreciation, a moment to rejoice your devotion to the Vedic civilization. So it will be in a PDF format. So you can attend the e-lesson. After that you have e-assessment, and then you have the e-feedback. Below that you will have the e-certificate. You can go there and download the PDF. So for 2 Sishyas, 3 Sishyas, since it's a generic certificate, all of you can circulate amongst each other. Thank you once again. I hope the e-certificate part is clarified and you will all be able to download. Namaskar.